In this photo deconstruction, we're going to go behind the scenes of a portrait shoot with the theme of the Lunar New Year. And in this shoot, I build a DIY set and use 6 different lights. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. My paid work is extremely varied. I've got my commercial work, like skincare, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals. I also shoot model portfolios, and I do portrait shoots. And so today I'd like to take you behind the scenes of a portrait shoot. It was actually a portrait/model portfolio combined. And when I do these shoots, the client gets the full experience. I don't treat a portrait client any different than a commercial or fashion client, which means this includes hair and makeup, wardrobe, concept development, and we shoot anywhere between 3 and 6 completely different concepts. And so my beautiful subject, Chrissy, at the end of the day, she wanted to end with a shoot celebrating the Lunar New Year. And we plan this all out ahead of time. I mean, that's how we get the correct wardrobe and how we can build a set. And so I went ahead and I bought some Lunar New Year lanterns that I could put in my scene. And we also got a beautiful headpiece as well as wardrobe. So we'd be able to do it proper justice so she could post this for Lunar New Year. This final image, I think it looks like it is shot in an exotic location with incredible lighting. Like it looks like you're transported someplace. But in fact, this was shot just inside my studio using an inexpensive room divider. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to take you behind the scenes, build in each light, and then we'll see what it looked like in camera versus post-processing. All right, so here's the behind the scenes. You can see that I've got these Lunar New Year lanterns, and I just have them hung on C-stand arms, nothing fancy. But the idea here is I didn't want to just shoot on a solid seamless paper background. I mean, that's nice and all, but I wanted to create something with a little bit more depth, do a DIY set. So we put a lantern in the foreground and a lantern in the background. That way, if I shot a narrow depth of field, it would look like there's a little bit of depth, like look like we're in an environment. And then similarly, we wanted to look like maybe we were in a room of some sort. So we took a room divider and knew that if that were out of focus and lit from behind, it would look like there's more space behind the divider. So that's where we began with our set. Now, as we were planning this, in order for the lantern to look real, to look good, it should probably be illuminated from behind, like look like there's a candle inside it or look like it's glowing. So that was part of our calculation as well. And for all of this to give a feeling of depth, I knew I needed to shoot at a narrow depth of field. So actually, let's start with our camera. I was shooting with the Canon R5, and I shot with a brand new 24-105 2.8, and I shot it on purpose at 2.8, so wide open. That would be what allows me to shoot the narrow depth of field and create that sense of depth. All right, so then let's kind of sprinkle around and take a look at what each of these 6 lights are doing. And by the way, this is not an example of where I'm showing, a teachable moment. Like I lit this for the subject to create something impressive and wow. And I do this for any of my portrait or fashion clients. All right, so let's start with the first one. Over here on the left-hand side is actually her main light. It is a Westcott Optical Spot with a kit lens. And this is what's going to create just like that little beam of light on her face, which you can see in the final result. There's not really much light on the headpiece or down the shirt, but just hard, crisp light on the face. All right, next, as we look at this final image, you'll see that we've got quite a bit of ambiance. Like there's a light in the back left, there's a light coming through this lantern, there's another one coming through the background. And so let's build in each of those. So you can kind of see in the back left, I've got a light with a 10-degree grid, and on it is a CTO, a color temperature orange. So that's giving me that little bit of flare, and it's also lighting the lantern. I did the same thing from the far right. I've got a 20-degree grid with a CTO backlighting the lantern. So it's giving that warm glow. And then there's one more here as well, another bare strobe with a CTO glowing through. So now when we go back to the original photo, we've got that one on the left, there's one glowing from the right in here, and then another coming through the room divider. So 3 lights from the back. All right, now looking at this, what else do we need? Well, if I didn't light from the front at all, the lantern would go pure black, and also you wouldn't see anything from her headpiece or her dress. So the additional lights we have in here is the one in the front to illuminate the lantern, which is a 10-degree grid. It's super low power. It's just to make sure the lantern didn't go dark. And then finally, I have a fill light, a beauty dish with a grid. So it kind of just concentrates on her instead of spilling on the background. And then I added a blue gel. So putting this all together, you can see it. Optical spot on the face, 1, 2, 3 lights from behind, a fill light from the front, and then a light to give a little illumination on this lantern. But now as you're looking at this, there's clearly some other things going on. Like, yes, we have the narrow depth of field. I love how much fall off there is to the lantern in the back left, but there's more to it than that. Like the glow and the haze on the signs, that is done in camera, and it's done with a specialty filter. It's a filter that I use all the time, and it's called a center field split diopter. They have different names. It's slit diopter, letterbox diopter, depends on which company you go with. But it's basically 2 magnifying glasses, and then there's an opening in the middle. And what's nice is you can rotate it. So as I was shooting the subject, I'm focusing, and then I'm rotating it around so that there would be no obstruction on her face, but it blurred out the edges, which really gave a sense of environment. It really gave a sense of haze and glowingness. I love it. But let me show you what I shot in camera. Now, when I say in camera, it's the raw file, but I'm always shooting tethered. I'm always processing my file. So what is in camera versus what I'm seeing as I'm shooting is always a little bit different. So this is what I shot in camera. And to be clear, I mean, the ambiance and the environment looks great. But remember how I added a blue fill on her? The blue fill, it was kind of overpowering my main light. It was meant to like fill in the shadows and on the headpiece, and honestly, it just didn't quite work. So I had to do a bit with my raw processing. So what I did is I warmed up the photo. I said, you know what, forget about that blue gel. Let me warm up the photo and brighten the contrast on her face. So I basically used a warmer white balance, increased the contrast a little bit. And then it's fine without the blue, but I did like the idea of the warm, cool contrast. So when I did my final retouch, I added blue to the shadows. And you can kind of see that here. You see the blue around the edges and the bottom of the frame. And then there's a few more things going on. Obviously, there is a strong retouch on the face. I was using super hard light, and then in this picture, it was so flat because there was a lot of haze in the space. I added a ton of contrast and a ton of clarity. But when I did that, it makes the skin look a little rough. So we cleaned up the skin, and then we decided, for effect, we just add a little bit more smile to her face. And by the way, of course, ran this by her first. I gave her 3 versions of expression, and this is the one that she chose. So you kind of see, originally, my blue fill didn't do what it was meant to do, so I said, let's ignore it. I warmed up the white balance, and then later on added blue to the shadows and cleaned up the skin in post-processing. So this elaborate DIY set, and this beautiful lighting, and this beautiful scene, is something that I did for a portrait and model portfolio. So in case that is something that you are ever interested in, I do personal branding, I do fashion shoots, I do celebrations of important moments in life. So if you want more information on that, feel free to go to my website and reach out to me about your very own portrait session. Instead, if you're more interested in learning about the lighting, you can go to learnwithlindsay.com, and I have many tutorials about lighting. In fact, I have things that talk about gels, about creating depth, or you can join me in person for one of my hands-on intensive workshops. So if you want to see the gear used in the making of these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below, and of course, visit adorama.com. And if you've enjoyed this photo deconstruction, I have so many more coming, so be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. See you next time, guys.